Julian Garcia. How have the last 10 years gone?
Oh, man. What do you want to know?
No, it's crazy how we were just talking about. I have Julian Garcia here from the New York Daily News. I intersected with Julian when we were both covering the Nets, me as somebody who was working for the team, and you with the Daily News. And that was 10 years ago. That's the part that's unbelievable. I said, how old? Because I remember you had a daughter, and I felt like she was really little, and you said, she's 15 now. Where does the time go? Isn't that, you must think about that all the time.
I do think about that all the time, and especially when it comes to that whole Nets era for me. I mean, it was the fall of, it was right now. Actually, wait a minute. It was actually 11 years ago that I started on the beat.
You covered the playoff season, right?
I came in for the 2006-2007 season. And so that would have been 11 years ago, I guess, right?
Yeah, that would have been.
And I think about that all the time because it was such a different time in my life. As you know, when you have a child, you go through these different phases. And, the early part, my daughter would have been about 4 years old back then. So you have that, the whole 1 through 4, and then you go through another phase. And now she's a teenager, and I'm going through that whole high school phase and all that stuff. So it was 10 years is a long time ago regardless, but when you have a child, it also seems like it could be a million years ago or it could be 5 minutes ago. It just depends what's going on.
Yeah. Do you remember that time? Because you have one child, but when it's your first, it's real nerve-wracking having a kid for the first time. Do you remember going through that at that age, and then really the time commitment to being a beat writer and the weird hours? That must have been very stressful.
It was, but you know what's funny? In this business, in sports writing or editing or whatever it is, in newspapers or media, it actually worked out very well for me because when you have a young child, at the time she was home, she wasn't necessarily in school the entire time. So the hours are pretty convenient because sports, as we know, all take place at night for the most part. So I'd be home during the day. I'd spend a lot of time home in the mornings. My wife was working at the time, and somebody needed to be home, obviously, in the daytime, in the mornings or whatever, with our daughter. So it actually did work out pretty well, and to this day, it still is a pretty convenient schedule as far as that goes.
So you're almost like an at-home dad in a way.
Yeah,
in the morning.
And it works out pretty well that way. I'd rather be home in the daytime. Like, for example, we just went through the summer, and I got to spend every day in the summer hanging out with my daughter. Now, usually she would wake up and say she wanted to go somewhere else and not be with me. But, I was able to make breakfast and stuff like that and just have a little bit of time at least to be a father. And so it works out. I mean, that's really the way it has always been. In sports, when you're covering sports or editing or whatever, you're obviously you're committed to doing this stuff at night and on the weekends. It's almost like being in the restaurant business where everybody else is enjoying themselves, leisure time, and you have to work. But it can work out pretty well because especially in my situation, there's a lot of times when I'm at work, my wife and daughter are already in bed. They're already sleeping. So it's not like I'm missing anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, actually. It's very much like the restaurant business because I think somebody who doesn't work in sports goes to the games, watches them as a fan, and a lot of fans become very expert level analysts these days too, but it's a totally different experience, and your whole kind of feeling about sports changes when the tick-tock of the night is totally different. Like that game ending, for the people who are watching it as fans, they go out excited, dejected, they move on with their life. They feel like 10 o'clock at night is late. When you're covering it, it's insane how that great ending can actually upend your night because you had I don't think people realize, and I don't know how much it's changed these days with the whole digital thing, but you had to have your story like written by the end.
Yeah.
And so if there was a weird thing that happened at the end that changed it, you were scurrying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you the story. Well, first of all, the one thing is, and I also teach a intro to journalism class at Monmouth University, and I tell the students all the time, certain people are interested in sports writing, whatever, you start to root for not the team or whatever, you root for the best story that's most convenient for you.
That's predictable.
Yeah.
By the end.
Well, yeah. You just, if the team that you grew up rooting for, and in my case, that would be, let's say, the Yankees. If they're losing 3-2 in the bottom of the ninth inning, you don't want them to tie the game to go to extra innings. You either want them to lose 3-2, or you want somebody to hit a walk-off home run to win 4-3. You don't want them to tie the game up, because then you're going to have to miss more time with whatever, or your night is going to be thrown. And it's just going to become all the more hectic.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I'll tell you the story about the Nets regarding that. I believe, in fact, it was my first season, so it would have been winter of 7. Okay, the Nets. I believe it was probably January. It was my first West Coast trip ever. And I don't recall who exactly they played. I know one of them was like the Clippers. It might have been Golden State. And then who else would they?
Well, if this was 2007, so was this, because you said, was this the year they went to the playoffs? Because this might have been.
Yeah, they went to the playoffs the first 2 years. They weren't very good, but they went to the playoffs. So it was like LA. It was like the Clippers, Golden State, and who else would they have played on that trip?
They would have played Sacramento, maybe.
I think it was Sacramento. Yeah. It probably was Sacramento. So the Nets, I believe, if I recall correctly at the time, became the first NBA team to ever lose 3 straight games by a single point. Okay? And it was my first West Coast trip. So keep in mind that when you're on the West Coast and you're writing a story, it's 10:30 there, but it's obviously 1:30 here. And our deadlines in the newspaper business, at least at the Daily News at the time, and still are, is 1:30. So 3 games in a row, they lose by 1 point. Not only that, it was 1:15 in the morning. They lose by 1 point all 3 games in a row. But they also they were all buzzer beaters. It was all like a last second shot.
That's the worst.
So it wasn't like they were losing by 3 points and then hit a shot to make it a 1 point game. All 3 games were buzzer beaters by the other team. So picture being in that situation where I was pretty inexperienced writing like that on my first West Coast trip. It was just complete chaos for me. And like you said, your team hits a shot, they win. You leave, you go get a beer, you go get something to eat. But for us, it's only starting now. Now you got to write a story and just craziness. That's what it was. It was exciting at the time, but when I think back on it now, I mean, it's still exciting. That's why you get in the business, to do these things. But I don't know how I managed to get through that.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's tough. Now, I always liked the writers' room. I thought that was. Did you have any idea that those rooms were like that? The post game writers' rooms, like the beat writer room, where everybody kind of travels with each other. You're with them more than your family. And I thought it's almost a sitcom. The ribbing, the talking about the teams, talking about the coaches, making fun of certain things. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It definitely is. And that's the way that I will tell you, this was I would say a pretty colorful beat. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty, that's kind of the way it is in the newsroom too. It's not that much different where
you're just more static in the,
you're sort of joking around a little bit and, all things like that. It was exciting. It was fun. To be perfectly honest with you, after a while, it does sort of grow a little bit on you and you're like, all right, I'm kind of done with that
character.
That's just my opinion there. I mean, I'm just giving you, some people can do that for 35, 40 years as they do. Other people are like, all right, I've had, 5-6 years of this and I think I'm good. But yeah, it was definitely fun. I mean, it was an interesting time in my life. Let's just say that. I mean, I wasn't necessarily prepared for it the way I could have been and should have been. It was kind of sprung on me, being put on that beat.
Yeah, how did that happen? Because what were you doing before that? You get kind of, was that that was an upgrade, right?
Yeah,
to do a pro
beat? It was. I was doing like what they call general assignment reporting at the time, and mixed in with some high school covers and stuff like that. And the guy who was covering the Nets at the time ended up getting a new job somewhere. And,
do you remember who that was?
Oh man.
I
think it would have been. Well, I think it was Ohm Youngmisuk.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
But I think what happened was somebody else was going to do the beat, and then in between, that guy ended up getting a new job, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So then I took over the beat, and
how quick was it sprung on you in terms of training camp?
Well, it was
season.
It was about well, the season, let's say it was during training camp.
Wow.
So it might have been like right before training camp.
Yeah.
So it was probably right about now, maybe late September of 06. And then there was like a little bit of a transition period where I recall I didn't like go on the first road trip for, I think of the regular season even, because they sort of transitioned me in a little bit. But then after that, I just went from there. And it was fun. It was exciting. But to be perfectly honest with you, it wasn't something that I ever really dreamed about doing. The other thing is I wasn't necessarily a huge basketball person, and I'm still not.
Yeah.
So that made it a little bit tough. But I think from a writing standpoint, a sports writing standpoint, basketball is kind of a cool sport to cover.
Yeah. Socially too, there's a lot of social.
I mean,
things
it's different. I mean, I think that's probably the case in any beat.
That's true.
Where these guys guys and men and women spend so much time together at the stadiums, on the road, or whatever. And you mentioned it before. You spend more time with these people than you spend with your family. And I know for a lot of people, myself included, that does become an issue after a while. I was thinking to myself, like, no offense to these guys, but when I was on the road with Al Iannazzone and Fred Kerber, and at the time Dave D'Alessandro, it was like, wow, I spend more time with these guys than I spend with my family, and I love those guys. I really did. I could not have picked a better group of people to be on the road with. Al, who, hopefully he hears this, was a major ball buster. Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
And, he made at times... You got aggravated at him, or any of those guys. But if you think about it, that's the way your life is when you're spending time with your family or whatever. Like, get this person away from me. They're annoying the hell out of me right now. But then you go back the next day and everything starts all over again. So it was kind of interesting. I did learn a lot about the business, but also about dealing with people, and just how to like manage through those periods of time when maybe you don't want to be in a certain situation. You don't want to be with these people anymore. You don't want to do this job. I mean, when you're on the road and you're on like a 4-game road trip on the West Coast, there's going to be nights where you don't want to necessarily be at the game or go to a practice or whatever, but your company had sent you out there to do that job, so you have to do it. That's your job. So it's sort of like the players in a way, much different, but similar in some ways, where these guys... You think they want to play a game every single night? They don't necessarily want to be out there all the time, right? But they have to do their job, and they have to figure out a way to get mentally prepared and all that stuff. And to be honest, I didn't necessarily do a great job of that. I mean, just get it out there right now. That beat for me wasn't really my thing. Yeah, I wasn't really necessarily that into that beat and all that stuff. So, but that was a great learning lesson for me. It was a great lesson for me to learn from.
Were you overwhelmed in it?
I don't think I was overwhelmed at all. No, because it wasn't really an overwhelming beat. I mean, let's face it, you're covering the New Jersey Nets. They really weren't that great. Yeah. But that changes things too. That really like makes it, at times people say, well, how hard is it to cover a team that sucks? It's completely different. And in some ways it might be better because you have a lot of controversial stuff, sometimes controversial, but there's always something to write about, like, why is this guy not playing well, or how come they're not playing this other player instead of this guy? There's really, no matter what's going on, winning, losing, or whatever, there's really never a time where you have nothing to write about. Yeah. And if you have nothing to write about, it's probably your fault, or maybe the team just is not doing enough to generate interest. Yeah. And I think at times the Nets probably were that way. I mean, let's face it, they weren't the most exciting team a lot. I mean, they had Jason Kidd, Vince Carter,
Richard Jefferson
in the beginning on the beat, but then the last 2 years,
it must have been something else.
It became. Well, you weren't around.
I wasn't. You were the 12-win team.
I was
right?
the 12-win,
and
that's the thing. Like, when the team wins 12 games, people are like, all right, well, that must have been horrible, but it really kind of wasn't, because you're writing, you're really like documenting this historically bad season, and there's always something to write about. I mean, if I remember correctly, that was the year that who was the guy who came down? What was that horrible disease that people were getting at the time? There was like something going around. I forget what it was. No, really, there was something going around. There's some some strain of the flu. I forget what it was.
Oh, H1N1?
No, it was something like that. there was something going around that was like this international crisis, and like one of the Nets got it, and then he missed a few games, came back and scored like 35 points his first game back. It was the guy who was from Memphis. He had 3 names. What was his name? Help me out.
Oh, Chris Douglas Roberts?
Yes. He had this horrible, not horrible, I mean, it wasn't going to die or anything, but it was like one of those things where it was transcended sports, this sickness he had. And he came back and he scored he had like a really great game in like one of his first games back. Everybody thought he was going to end up being like the next Vince Carter or something like that.
Yeah.
Because he had like 5 or 6 games in that season where he scored like 30 points, 28 points.
Yeah, came out of Calipari.
Yeah.
You know.
But it just never worked out. So anyway, there's always something to write about.
Yeah.
There's always something going on. And that's the case in the business in general. I say this to like the young people who are just getting involved. You know, I can go in my office now on a random Thursday night, right? Or let's say it's a Monday night, right? I'll say Monday night because oftentimes in the baseball season, the Mets and Yankees might both be off together. So there's no baseball game on a Monday night in August or whatever, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, there's not much going on. There's no football going on yet. The Yankees and Mets aren't playing. But then inevitably, something always happens.
Yeah.
Somebody will die, like a prominent sports figure might die that day, or there's some huge controversy, so-and-so got suspended, or some star football player in practice gets hurt. There's rarely ever is there a time when there's nothing to write about or nothing to cover.
Yeah.
I mean, it rarely ever happens. There's always something going on.
Well, I always think right when things feel preordained, nature has a way of kind of taking care of it. It's kind of like how the Golden State Warriors won the championship again this year after adding Kevin Durant. 3 straight finals of them against the Cavs. Obviously, they won 2 out of 3. And coming out of this last one where they beat them in 5, and who knows if they could have swept them, it felt like domination. Everyone's like, well, this is going to be it forever. And then even just this summer, everything changes. People are traded. New players get drafted. So that is the beauty of sports, I think, is that we want change as opposed to, I think, in our normal lives, as we're seeing politically, sometimes we're like really nervous of change. But I think sports allows you to almost live that virtual reality.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only people that don't want change are like the Patriots fans, you know,
right.
They've been the same for like 15, 20 years, whatever
That's
it's been. But you're right. I mean, no matter what's going on, things absolutely change. You can go into a season one year and think, well, this team is going to be great. And then all of a sudden, the first week, somebody gets hurt. Like, look at the Giants, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's like, oh, the Giants are going to be,
10-6,
really great,
they're gonna...
great team. And it still might be. I mean, they played one game.
You're a Giants fan, right?
Yeah. But now it looks like with Beckham being injured, all of a sudden, everything changes. And you're like, all right, well, if they don't win this week, which is not an easy game at all, then they'll be 0-2, and I think they're playing somebody pretty good next week, too. I don't remember who it is, but they have a tough schedule. So, that's the type of thing that happens where you go into a season and you're like, all right, well, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and things don't really ever play out that way.
At Eagles.
So that's the way it was with the Nets and things. It was just like, all right, well, they have Jason Kidd, they have Vince Carter, they're going to be really good. And then all of a sudden, I don't remember the timelines about anything. Honestly, it's been so long.
Sure.
But then all of a sudden, Jason Kidd says, I want out of here.
That was something else.
And all of a sudden now you're trading Jason Kidd. And when you trade Jason Kidd, now Richard Jefferson's not happy and Vince Carter's not happy. And then all this other stuff goes down. It just becomes complete chaos, and you don't know what's going to happen. So that's life, I guess, and that's the way sports is. And that's why sports is a good sort of metaphor and a lesson teacher for young people, I guess, also. Like, you never know what's going to happen, and you have to deal with all the BS that does go down, and it's kind of cool that way, I guess.
Now, on the point of becoming a professional sports team beat writer, and I know a lot of people might say, well, the Nets are sort of the back door into that, are they? But did you find yourself, because you always want to hold yourself to account against the other competitors, especially early on, would you find yourself reading all of their stories too, to be like, how am I doing? Did I miss anything? To almost get up to speed.
Mean, here's the thing. Like, I want to be as honest as I possibly can here about this. Like, what I was up against on that beat was tough because the person at the time, and probably still, but especially then in sports, known as Dave D.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was a great beat writer. I mean, he didn't miss anything at all.
He was everything. A great writer, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And each of those guys, in their own way, had something that they brought to the table. You know, each of them had different sources, and each of them did different things. So I was like, when you're coming onto a beat and you're brand new, I'd never covered a beat before, ever. It wasn't something where I would be like, I couldn't really compete with them in that regard. You know what I mean? I could just really try to do the best that I could. And there was all different stuff going on. It was a much different time at my newspaper also. You know, the New Jersey Nets, let's face it, weren't really a major priority at the time. Isn't
it amazing, though, that like nobody's covering them now?
It is sort of amazing. It's sort of amazing and unfortunate. Yeah. It has to do with two things, I think. A, the business on our side, journalism, sports journalism, but also the fact that the Nets, I don't think, have done a great job of holding their end.
They feel very similar to when they were in New Jersey, right?
They do. And it's just, but I think that just because you play in a major media market, but they played in the same market back then, but just because your arena happens to be in the middle of, you know, I think Brooklyn, they say if Brooklyn was its own city, it would be like the 8th biggest city in the country or something like that. Just because you play there doesn't mean that you're going to get the coverage, you know, or it doesn't mean that you're going to be a good team either, you know. It's different. It is amazing that they don't get the coverage because you would think about it and it's like, they're the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, it's a basketball team in the middle of Brooklyn. Basketball in Brooklyn is like, forget it. I mean, it's huge. It's like, you know, it's the capital of basketball practically. And I know that because I covered high school basketball in Brooklyn and stuff. So it is sort of amazing, but I think on the Nets side of things, they really haven't done a great job of like, they said they were going to do this. They said they were going to become like this major force, and they haven't really done that at all. You know,
I've always said there's parallels between, and maybe I haven't said this publicly. I think I have though, but there are some parallels between the brain trust of their business side and the brain trust of Donald Trump's administration and the way he runs. It's these
they're both
promises.
Russian, first of all.
That's true. But there are these promises that no, this is the time. It's great. Yeah. This is great. There's no long-term thinking, and I think in sports you have to have long-term thinking because people will fall for your press release once, twice, but if they follow through, which news does and still does a great job on that, if they follow through on the thread to see if your promises were delivered. And again, it's sports, it's the Nets, it's in Brooklyn, so I don't know if it's as important to hold it to account as it would a political figure. But don't you think it's like, I'm not going to fall for that anymore?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's a good point. But I do think this. I think that and I'm just sort of coming up with this right now. I mean, I haven't really thought this through that much.
That's okay.
But one of the things I think is that as far as the Nets go, knowing what I do know about some of the people that are still there, perhaps, is they think of everything from a business perspective, all right, from the business standpoint.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to make this business decision. Now, I understand where that comes from. People might hear me say that and say, well, it is a business. But it is a business, but it is also you are still a sports team that your primary objective in sports is to win the games, to be victorious over a sustained period of time. And I think when you look at things from a business standpoint, you can't make the same decisions. You can't put out a press release that's going to make your team win.
No.
You can't make a business promise that's going to make your team win. Moving your team from point A to point B is not going to make your team win.
No.
That stuff is not going to happen.
Nope.
What's going to make your team win is acquiring the right players, putting in the right coach, and changing your mindset, changing your...
and allowing some level of discretion for the basketball operations to run over time. And sometimes I always felt this is where it hit me about working in sports. I always thought, oh, this is great. I'm covering sports. But you realize you're doing the same job the whole time. and you probably saw this covering the Nets between when they'd go to the playoffs and then when they're, probably the 12-win team, as you said, gets a lot of buzz too. But in that intermediate period where they were sort of like a 34-win, 35-win team, that's when you're kind of out there and no one's paying attention really. But I always thought, wow, if the team wins, everybody's happy, all of a sudden you're doing a good job. If the team goes on an 8-game losing streak, get this guy off the road. Everything's bad. Everyone's bummed. And that's why I always felt it doesn't, like what the business operations do, they always need to be on the back of the wagon, letting the sports operations run, and do your best to kind of leverage moments that are already happening. That's where you can make a killing. If the business leads, they're going to be let down a lot.
Well, I did see that. I think I saw that a lot without giving specifics because I really don't remember. I think what you're talking about is I sort of remember like any time the Nets would be in this sort of bad place, which was often, they would try to business their way out of things. Mm-hmm. They would try to, let's come up with this promotion. That's the word I was looking for. Let's come up with this promotion to draw fans in.
And then they want you to write about it.
Yeah, exactly.
To the sports fans to get them excited for something that's not the team.
That's exactly right. And I'll give you two examples, and I am biased, I have to say. I am a little bit biased here, but I will say this, and I'm not breaking any news here with this. Two teams that do a phenomenal job of doing the absolute opposite of that are the New York, obviously, Yankees and the New York Giants.
Yeah, and they're very much of the same lineage.
Absolutely. Are obviously two of the most successful franchises in the history of sports who do, if you ever note, like when the Yankees aren't doing well for a little bit of a period of time, which, you know, let's face it, we're all spoiled. It doesn't happen much, right? But if you look at the last, say, 3 years in the Yankee world, believe it or not, they haven't been that successful. You know, they haven't made the playoffs much or whatever. So that's considered non-successful for Yankee fans and their team. But they never really got to the point, and they will never do this unless they sell the team, where they panic and say, all right, well, you know, we're going to lose fans. Let's see what kind of gag we can come up with. Maybe we'll have cheerleaders on the dugout or whatever to make sure fans don't leave.
Right.
You know, maybe we'll come up with this promotion and we'll ask the Daily News and the New York Post and everybody else to write about it to sort of draw the attention away from the fact that we're not winning. It's never about that with them. It's never about that. It's always about, all right, we're not doing well right now. Which players can we acquire to make the change? Or do we have to change a coach? Or do we have to bring in Alex Rodriguez to talk to these young guys to get them into a better place mentally? It's always about what's going on the field. You know, that's all you ever really hear about. That's all you ever hear about with the New York Giants is what's going on the field. Not this sort of BS, let's trick the fans into thinking that we're really doing well, that we're trying hard. The fans don't really care that you're trying hard.
No.
That might work. No offense to anybody who might hear this who lives in somewhere. That might work somewhere else in the Midwest or something like that. Well, they're trying hard. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't work. But it doesn't work here. You know, if you're not winning, they think
it's a Wall Street mentality a little bit.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think the fans here do appreciate an effort. Obviously,
right.
They appreciate the effort, but in the big picture, they want you to win. So it's not about you. You can't trick Giants fans. You can't trick Yankee fans. And I think the mistake, and I'll give you another team that does this. I feel bad saying this. The Mets. The Mets always, I think, try to make their fans think, you know, all right, things aren't that as bad as they seem. You know, we're going to be okay because we got this thing going on. There's just something off.
And they were just in the World Series 2 years ago. Yeah. It's crazy. It's very Jets-like, too.
It totally is. And it's funny because in New York here, we have these certain teams that do things the right way.
We have so many that you can, like, look at.
Yeah, the
and
Giants,
they all are back, you know.
Giants, Yankees. I would probably even throw, not knowing much about the structure of their team, honestly, probably throw the Rangers in there. Now, it's easy to say these teams are all successful. They're all pretty strong teams. But which comes first? You know, and then you have the other side of things, which is the Jets, the Mets, the Nets, the Knicks. Let's not even go there.
Yeah, but how about when you look at the Knicks, for instance? Dolan is the owner of the Knicks, and he's the owner of the Rangers,
it's weird.
though.
It's weird.
So he had these issues with Glenn Sather early on. and he actually stuck to the guy and allowed him to grow this. I mean, how long has Sather been there now? A decade, even more probably. And then you look at what he tried to do, which was, I think, what he tried to do with Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson sort of became a child.
Well, I think I brought that up at work one day. I said, it's kind of weird. Like, Dolan is one person with the Knicks, and then he's another person with the Rangers. You never hear about him. You never hear about Dolan when you're talking about the Rangers. You just never hear.
It's true.
Nothing ever happens. And I think part of it might be that I think basketball is much more of a personality-driven sport.
Yeah.
Right? So Phil Jackson comes in, and he wants to be the star of the whole thing and all that. And hockey is very much a sort of blue-collar, shut up and just go play thing. So I think in certain ways, like maybe Dolan is more interested in that. Maybe he's got that ego where it's like, I want to be the star. I want to be the center of attention or whatever.
Well, he sit in front court.
Yeah.
It's like you wouldn't see someone really sitting front ice.
Maybe he doesn't know as much about hockey. I don't know. Maybe that's just a guess. I have no idea. Maybe he does know. Maybe he's just not a hockey person or whatever. But it is sort of strange that he owns both of those teams, and it's, totally different on both sides,
It's a hell of a city to cover sports.
Oh, I mean, it's the best. I mean, obviously, like I said before, there's never a time when there's nothing going on.
And there's never a time where there's not somebody succeeding, right? I mean, that's the beauty of it, because things go really bad when they're hopeless and they're embarrassing. Although it's good to cover that too, but
there's never a time where there's not somebody succeeding, but you could also say there's never a time when there's not an epic failure going on, which is true. I mean, there's always going to be something. I mean, like the Jets right now. I mean, the worst thing in the world for a team and also for a paper covering a team is to have a team that's irrelevant.
Week one.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter. And that's where the Nets came in, like back in the tail end there. They were irrelevant. And they're sort of in that, they're there now. They're irrelevant. You'd rather be like really bad and have a bunch of players who are like really pain in the ass, like they're really controversial or whatever, because then at least you're drawing attention, But certain teams just sort of are irrelevant. But yeah, you're right. There's just always something going on. And in New York especially, it's like there's never an off season anymore for anything. I think hockey has an off season.
Yeah.
But like the major, like baseball never has an off season. Like I know for a fact, like I'll go to work on like December 15th, for example, and something will happen with a Met or a Yankee or whatever. There'll be baseball news on December 15th. There'll be baseball news on January 10th.
Is it still the most important sport to the paper, or is football, like, how does the order of sports go?
I think that's come up before too, and I think football drives things much more
because of the betting,
like on the web.
Yeah.
Gambling has a huge thing to a huge part in that. Web, I think, if I understand this correctly, like football is much more popular online. I think much more popular online. But when you turn on the radio and listen to the fan or whatever, and like I just said, you will hear people call up at the first call on the Mike Francesa show, 105 on a Thursday afternoon in the middle of December. Somebody's calling up, still pissed off about the decision Terry Collins made in the middle of August.
Yeah, decisions are great.
That is, without a doubt, that happens all the time. Baseball it's
got a long memory.
Absolutely. People love to talk about baseball. And no matter when it is, no matter what they're talking, they just love to talk about baseball. Now, football, you could say, is similar to that.
Big moments. But overall, people do remember, like, you forget things so quickly in football.
I think in baseball, because it's such a long season and you have to make such a commitment to it, people love to talk about baseball. It's just, talking baseball is like, it's pretty fun, There's so much you can talk about. Nobody talks about, like, I shouldn't say nobody, but it's rare to hear people talk about, do you think so-and-so is a Hall of Famer? In all these other sports, baseball, people love to talk about, like, this guy is a Hall of Famer, this guy isn't, this guy's better than that guy, this guy hit longer home runs than that guy. The numbers count more in baseball. You know, so-and-so hit 536 home runs. You don't really have that so much. Like, I don't know how many touchdown passes Eli Manning has thrown in his career. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Right.
If I had to take an educated guess, I could probably average it out and maybe come near it or whatever. but you know how many home runs Alex Rodriguez hit, or you know how many, home runs so-and-so hit, or you know how many games so-and-so won as a pitcher or whatever. So that's why baseball is so popular, one of the reasons why. But to get back to the original question, New York is a great place to be involved in sport. It's the best place. Let's 100%. Face it.
You don't have to. The beauty of New York actually is that you don't have to follow other teams. Like the NBA, it's fun to follow the league for whatever reason. The NFL, it's fun to follow the league. Baseball's very parochial now, where you follow your local team, and you're really not that interested, I think, in the current environment of the rest of the league. Hockey's like that. But if you don't want to follow the outside New York, you don't have to. You just got so much. We have 3 hockey teams.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a little much at times. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, there's this complete saturation. I mean, we have like probably too many teams. I mean,
sure.
At times they could probably get rid of the Jets right now. Nobody would care. But it's just like there's I'll give you an example of something. In my business, and especially at my paper, we have this thing where it's called back page alert.
Mm-hmm. Which is the front page for sports, right?
Well, yeah. So the back page is where we put all our big news or whatever. But there's this phrase that I think I know who might have created it. It's called back page alert. So you look ahead to the schedule, and there's one coming up Thursday of this coming week. I don't believe there's a Yankee game or a Met game. I think they're both off. So we have a back page alert, like what's going to be on the back page that day. Nobody knows what's going to be on the back page. But we know from experience that when we get to work on Thursday, we're absolutely going to have a back page.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. And I'll give you an example. Like it could very well be, God forbid, well, no, I'll make it a positive thing so I don't jinx anybody. But like let's say Beckham doesn't play this week, right? Thursday morning, the Giants will come out and say Beckham's playing this week. And all of a sudden we'll have the back page. He's back or whatever. We'll come up with something. So even though we have these back page alert days where we're on alert to we have no back page, there's no major news going on, something always happens. Somebody gets hurt. Somebody, God forbid, in a sports legend in the city dies.
Yeah.
Or, somebody says something stupid. Somebody goes on Twitter and makes a stupid comment. Somebody gets in a fight on Twitter with Donald Trump. Something will happen. There's really, I don't ever remember a day where it was like, oh my God, we have nothing to report. It just doesn't happen,
My final sports thing, and this is very funny because it actually ties the two of us together. I got to travel for the first time to Summer League in 2007. So I just turned 25. I'm traveling to Summer League. And you had said going in, you're like, let me check in with you. I just want to, about how things are going down there, what people are doing. And so I would talk to you about the games and everything. And then I think there was one point where I'm talking to you and I'm like, oh my God, Jamal McGlure just got on the elevator. And in the next day's paper, you wrote that. And I was like freaked because they're calling me and they're like, it was totally you.
I didn't know that. I apologize.
No. I'm not. That's why it's one of the funnier stories because, it's totally true. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, Jamal McGlure just came on, and you very smartly put together that, well, he was a target. He's just in the hotel with the team. And so you didn't do anything wrong, but it was just hilarious because they call me up and they're like, don't talk to Julian.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is. I mean, that's the way people work this. And believe me, there's people in this business who do this all the time and are masters at that.
Is that the hardest thing?
Absolutely. For me, it was because I didn't know anybody when I first got there. And it was just like, hey, I will tell you this, and this is going to be a moment of brutal honesty from me regarding that.
Sure.
And I hope somebody might hear this who wants to be a sports writer or whatever, and hopefully this helps them out and to understand how it works. You have to really care about what you're writing about what you're covering. And if you don't care, you have to be able to fake it a lot.
Right.
And in order to work sources and come up with sources, there's a lot of moments where you have to really be sort of a bullshit artist.
Sure.
Right? Hope you don't have to beep that out, do you? It's a podcast,
no,
right?
It's a podcast.
Right. So you have to you have to create friendships with people that you wouldn't necessarily be friendly with if you weren't doing what you were doing. And I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that that was probably the part of the job that I really didn't like that much.
Yeah.
Because I'm sort of like one of these people, like, I want to talk to who I want to talk to.
Yeah, you don't want to waste
I'm one of those
time
people that when you're at a restaurant, like sometimes you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes over and like sits down at your table and like starts talking to you about life. I'm the person that really doesn't like that much.
Because you like know what's going on.
You know what I mean? Like, so in a way, the hardest part for me was developing sources, because I had to, what you have to do in sports when you're covering sports is, all right, I'm going to cover this team. I'm going to call up this executive and I'm going to schmooze a little bit. I'm going to talk to him about certain things, about other things.
And they know you're doing. They know you're doing that.
Yeah.
Though. Isn't that the craziest part?
Yeah,
it's
they
like
know you're doing it, but they're doing it also.
Yeah, sure.
You're both doing it.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't have an easy time with that. I could do that. I could probably do that a lot better now because I'm more mature than I was back then. I was not prepared to be in that position at the time. And from a social standpoint, and that does come into play, social part of it. I just wasn't really in a place where I could pick up the phone and call up a person and say, hey, this is Julian from the Daily News. Tell me what's going on with your team, and do it in a way that needed to be done. You have to do it sort of in a covert fashion. And it just wasn't my thing, and I'm not saying anybody who does it, people who do it are masters at it.
Well, how about Woj?
Yeah.
Adrian Wojnarowski. He is like,
I don't know how that,
he's like the highest level of that.
I can't understand how that works. That's a whole nother
right?
podcast. I don't understand that. And for me, the hardest part was pretending to care about a topic that I didn't necessarily care about. I wasn't waking up every day wondering,
texting, calling,
what the Nets were up to, and that was a part of it. That
and
made
you were
it
with
very
people
difficult.
who were very good at that.
Yes, yes, and that was their job, and that for me, I couldn't really ever put myself in a place. And there's other factors, and I'm not saying people don't have things going on, but like when I had a small child at the time, I have a wife who has a health condition and stuff like that. So, and I was just in a different place as a person, so it depends what's going on in your life. For me, I had a difficult time doing exactly that, like getting myself into a place where I could sort of care about a topic that I didn't necessarily care about all that much.
Now, because you're at one of the major papers, does it come to you at some point?
What do you mean?
Like, do sources even do they end up gravitating to you because you are one of the major papers?
In a professional standpoint, from a professional sports standpoint, I would say probably not so much. Depends who you are. But I know from my own experience, like we get emails and press releases and all that stuff all the time. People are constantly coming to us saying, hey, I got this story idea. Can you write this? So there's never, like, again, it goes back to there's never a time when you have nothing to write about.
Yeah.
But in professional sports, it's a lot different because there's so much that, like the Giants, or I'll use the Yankees as an example. They don't really need any one person to cover their team. They don't need one reporter because they're going to have the coverage anyway.
Right.
They're going to have worldwide coverage. They have reporters in their locker room that are literally from the other side of the world, Japan, China, wherever. And they don't. So if one person drops out or one person doesn't care about a particular topic, it's not really going to hurt them at all. But from the Nets standpoint, they were completely opposite of that. They needed as much coverage as they could get. But just to get back to from what was going on with me, it is very difficult at times. I think the hardest part of that job for me and for most people would be the fact that you have to start to care about certain things that you wouldn't necessarily care about. Like
you're almost like a politician campaigning.
When you were going, when I was going through those last 2 years, and the team really wasn't very good at all.
Yeah,
my paper didn't really care about them that much. I was writing stories that were like 400 words or whatever. These small stories that were being buried, but you still have to care.
You never know when something could pop, and all of a sudden it's a back page.
You
thing.
Still have to care, and that was the hard part for me. Like giving a crap about something that most people didn't give a crap about. That's what was hard.
It's a fascinating thing because the Wojnarowski thing is really cool in watching him go to ESPN, and then he has this podcast, and you see who all his guests are.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, a lot of these are probably his sources.
Yeah.
But the even cooler thing is, I don't know how much you followed what's happened with him, but he had hired a group of people, including Bobby Marks from or the old Nets GM. He hired him to work with him at the Vertical on Yahoo. He hired this kid named Shams Charania. He's 22 years old, maybe. What this kid did was, when he was in college in Chicago, he worked for Real GM. I don't think he got paid really anything. It's like an online site, blog. And he was able to get credentials. But he noticed in Chicago, there's so many people there. There's so many media members. You're not going to make any inroads anywhere. And I don't think he knew what inroads he wanted to make at that time, but maybe he did because he ended up being really good. So he went, you know what? I'm a young kid. I could live this. I'm going to ask for credentials in Milwaukee, and I'm going to drive up there 90 minutes for every game and back, because nobody's rolling through Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And you're getting all the major players coming when their teams visit. They have nothing going on. You could probably go hang at their hotel and talk to them. And now he's beating Woj to sources. And it's a phenomenal thing to watch, right?
A very good idea.
And you're seeing some national people do this too. Zach Lowe at ESPN, who Bill Simmons was the one who found and took him into Grantland, and now this guy reportedly making like $1 million a year or something to write about the NBA. Wow. He will pick a city when they're on a homestand, and he'll be like, I'm going to Milwaukee for a week. I'm going to Salt Lake City for a week, because it's the same premise.
Yeah.
It's actually very smart from a national angle.
It is.
And you're going to get access to people.
Yeah. So if you walk into the Garden and try to do the same thing, there's just so much going on. Reporters from everywhere, in a player's minds,
international
in a different place,
headquarters of many media places,
and also when the game is over, players want to get the hell out of there because they want to go out to
party.
What's that place called? That
10 Oak or something? Jason Kidd place.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
So okay, that was a lot of sports. What is it like working at a major traditional news operation, newspaper, and yes, they have the digital aspect, but in this media environment, it feels like it's cratering all around.
You talking mainstream media? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, sure, mainstream media, but you look at even digital upstarts who have figured out the news. No one can get people to pay for things online, and great work is still being created. Do you feel that in the newsroom, like as an existential thing happening underneath you, like an earthquake?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's been like more of a subtle thing. So at times, it's sort of gradually gone in that direction. I wouldn't say it feels like an earthquake underneath us, but I mean, for example, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Daily News just got bought. We just got bought by this company called Tronc.
Oh, Tronc, right.
Yeah, so it's the Tribune Online Content. Now, the name in itself suggests that it's just going to be a website, but they've told us, no, we're going to keep producing a newspaper.
They did LA Times.
And they have the LA Times, Chicago Tribune.
Yeah, they're making a big...
I think they have a couple of papers in Florida. They have nine newspapers throughout the country, and they have newspapers, which is key.
God, Tronc in the age of Trump.
Yeah.
Two bad words.
So, when we first got bought by Tronc, I thought I had heard Trump, and I said, now we're owned by Trump, and I have no more job left, because you can look on Twitter and see what I've said.
Have you been
him.
blocked by Trump?
No, not yet, which I'm a little bit insulted about. We'll get to that, hopefully.
We will.
Make sure we leave plenty of time for that. But it's definitely different. I mean, I've been in the business. It's sort of weird. Like I feel strange even saying this, because I'm not an old guy. I mean, I'm going to be 43 in about a week and a half. Actually, I shouldn't even say it. What's today? The 16th? Less than a week. I'll be 43.
Well, so you were like 32 when you started with
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm one of these people that when I started out, we literally didn't even have a website at the Daily News. Like, I didn't even have a cell phone when I started. I had a beeper.
Wow.
When I started out at the Daily News, we had no website. The paper was everything. And now the website is everything, but we still have a paper. And to a lot of people, the paper still matters a lot. I mean, to me, the paper still matters a lot. To a lot of readers, the paper still matters a lot. And
the Daily News is the kind of left of center compliment to the Post in a way?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what you would say, right?
Absolutely.
Editorially wise?
Absolutely. Yeah. Donald Trump reads the New York Post.
Is that important to you? Would it be hard for you to work at the
I think
Post?
so.
Even though their sports is good and their regular news
I mean, from that
similar,
standpoint, it wouldn't necessarily be. But I would definitely have a problem if I had to walk into a party, let's say a family function, and people said to me, "Wow, your newspaper really loves Donald Trump, and your newspaper really covers him well, and not well, covers him in a positive way."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that would sort of be an issue for me. I think. Like if I worked at, God forbid, and this would never happen, I'll tell you right now, if I got laid off, fired, if I was desperate for a job, like if I worked at, say, like Breitbart News or something like that, I mean, I don't know how I would be able to do that.
Did you see them yesterday or the last few days, actually?
They're turning a little bit.
I took some looks.
They're turning a little bit.
Yeah.
But just to get back to your original question for a minute, things are definitely changing a lot, and people say this all the time. Like you hear that stupid phrase, that stupid statement that people make, journalism is dying,
right.
Journalism is dead. It is the furthest thing from the truth. It's like one of the stupidest things people could say. Journalism is not even close to dying. It is not even close to dying.
Is this one of the great things of Donald Trump, actually?
Well, he's got something to do with it.
It's unearthed that it showed he almost brought the masses to why news matters.
Yes, and I think that's probably the case with a lot of the BS that comes out of his mouth, where he tries to shoot something down, he tries to crush something, and as a result of it, it becomes more well known and better than it could have been.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, it's kind of weird. I guess we're getting away from that, but I'm happy to go in this direction. In a way, that whole "Make America Great Again" phrase.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, he's not really doing that. But in a certain way, he might actually be doing that in a roundabout way.
It's an anti-force.
In a way that he doesn't really even realize, and he didn't intend it to be. Like, look at all the people that have come together and opposed a lot of the things that he stands for, right? People have come together. People have said, like, I'll use myself as an example. I wasn't into politics at all.
Is that right?
I'm not a political person at all. I mean, if you went back 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I couldn't even tell you what the Democratic Party stood for, what the Republicans stood for, which presidents in the past were from which party. I didn't really understand.
What were you tweeting about then?
I was tweeting more about sports and Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
Mostly Bruce Springsteen. But now I'm much more aware of politics. I'm much more aware of what I should be aware of. Like, what does this party stand for? What does this particular person stand for? What are they going to try to do to my country if I vote for them? And so in a way, he's responsible for that.
Since when? When did that turn? At what point?
I would say probably early on, like maybe in the beginning of his campaign.
Okay, so
when I started to pay attention, like what's going on with this guy? Like, why are people taking him seriously? Like, that's the thing. I don't, to this day, I don't know.
And is that because we are close to the source as New Yorkers? That we've seen him and you're following him all these years? We know who he is.
Well, I think, I mean, we obviously knew who he was. And I'll tell you this, this is crazy for me. I actually met Donald Trump.
Really? In
the beginning of my daily news career. I think I was a full-timer already. I might have been an intern. There was some period of time there. It's kind of cloudy to me. I started out as an intern in 95. So it was either like 95 or 96. There was some event going on in the lobby of the Trump Tower.
Trump Tower, yeah.
And a bunch of us from the Daily News were there. Something was happening. I don't know what it was. But one of the PR people said to us, would you like to come up and meet Donald Trump?
Come up?
So at the time, we said, of course, we would like to meet Donald Trump. And I got to tell you this. This is really strange for me to say this. He was a really nice guy.
Yeah, very likable,
really nice
charismatic,
guy. Yeah. He shook our hands, he welcomed us, and it was the office that you see in the magazine,
the gilded
and stuff like that, with the eagle on his desk and all. And when I think back on that, it's like, all right, well, was he really a nice guy, or was it just his schmoozing that I talked about before? He's the master of that, I guess. Yeah. But so we know of him more than. I was just watching Bill Maher last night. Yeah. And he had on.
Did you ever watch Bill Maher before?
Probably.
I mean, before this period of time.
But I'm much more into it now. And he had on a cast of people that were from New York, and they all said, well, we knew Donald Trump. Like, this is not a surprise to us. This is why we didn't vote for him, because we're from New York and we know what Donald Trump is about.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of that involved. But, yeah, I mean, he's part of the reason why I think he has, without a doubt, helped the media. He's helped make journalism great again.
It's creating jobs, right?
Creating jobs. He actually is creating jobs. I think from that standpoint he is. He's been actually very good for the media. And I'll tell you what, not just selling, not just sales, and not just clicks and all that stuff, but in my opinion, the people who are paying attention and the people who want to keep an open mind and who aren't just chirping fake news all the time, they are realizing how great places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, some of the cable outlets, how great they are at doing their job. They are realizing, wow, like, I really need to follow these people and listen to what they're reporting. They're good at what they do. Whereas I think, if you went back 5-6 years ago, maybe these same people weren't really paying attention at all.
Yeah.
Now they're paying attention. Now they're picking up the paper. Now they're online on Twitter or whatever, and they're paying attention to what's going on. And I think from that standpoint, it has without a doubt helped journalism.
It's going to turn into the where were you the night Donald Trump got elected president, right? Everyone's going to think about where they were. And the thing that fascinates me is, for instance, the New York Times, they're going to cover presidential administrations the same way, however it cuts, but that they happen to have Maggie Haberman and Glenn Thrush there, who go back to like City Hall in New York. They go back with Donald Trump 20-something years. And I heard an interview with Maggie Haberman where the whole interview, she's writing. She wrote 3 stories while the interview was happening. She's sourcing. She's doing all this. They got a book coming out. But she said she was not going to be covering Washington and the White House until Donald Trump was elected.
Wow.
So her entire beat changed that moment. And it's almost like, I don't want to make light of anything that happens, in world affairs, but it's almost like some kind of figurative bomb happening, and then you're called to serve in some ways. And I think he's been the vacuum that's brought us all in. Ever since I was with the Nets, actually, I had this moment where I was all sports all the time. In fact, all Nets. So it was perfect for me. And then I remember one day my friend said to me, he's like, you got to stop talking about the Nets. You're driving me nuts. I can't hear about the Nets anymore. And I went, wow. I remember I went into work the next day at the Nets, and I said, I'm going to start reading at least the front page of the New York Times online every day. And I remember reading it the first day going, I have no idea what any of this is. Who's Robert Mugabe? Who's like, what's going on in this country? And I think you need those moments. So I'd been following it, and Obama was the one who brought me in to caring about politics, and Trump has done that for a lot of us for good and bad reasons.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I'll tell you this. Now, I've been in newspapers for 20 years now, right? And I consider myself, I'm an educated guy or whatever. But I wasn't a New York Times reader before. I would glance at it or whatever. But another moment where I'm going to try to be brutally honest with you about something and reveal this thing. So I always would consider, like, I work for the New York Daily News. I work for Tabloid. I'm a Jersey guy. I'm into sports. I'm into rock and roll. Go down the shore. The sort of stereotypical New Jersey,
Goomba,
40-year-old guy. No,
I know, I'm kidding. I don't even know what that means.
But so I never really read the New York Times, and I also, more so than that, was sort of intimidated by it.
Yeah.
It was like
college.
I'm not really a New York Times reader,
yeah.
Right? Like, if I pick up the New York Times, I'm not going to really understand what you just said. Like, I don't really understand what they're saying. But when I started to read the New York Times, I actually have a subscription now online. I was like, wow, this is not anything that I can't understand or can't grasp. In fact, the writing in the New York Times is so good because it's so simple.
Right.
It's not something that, because they're from the New York Times, their writing level is like something off the charts that we can't understand as normal everyday people. The fact that they write at such a level that everybody can understand is what makes them great, right? So I started to read the New York Times. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. Like, I get all this. I'm supposed to be reading New York Times. Like it all makes sense to me. And it's not something that's above my level, right? It's something that I can totally grasp. And once I started to read them, I was like, wow, this is like, it's really kind of fascinating to me. And I sort of understood it better. I understood the business better. Like, this is how people are supposed to write. You're supposed to write at a level that's not fourth grade or fifth grade. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is at a level that no matter who picks up the paper, they will understand what you're talking about. You don't have to use big words. You don't have to use words that people have never heard of to be a New York Times writer. You know, you don't have to write stuff that nobody's going to understand. It's the complete opposite of that. You know, so when I sort of impressed myself, to be honest with you, when I read, I was like, wow, I get this stuff. Like, this is not something that I should be intimidated about. And to get back to the original point, it was all because I wanted to read about Donald Trump.
Right.
Like, what's this guy up to these days? Not necessarily just that. What's he up to? But what does it mean for us?
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean for me? How is this going to affect my life? More so, how is it going to affect my daughter's life? What is this going to mean 15 years down the road? What's it going to mean 20 years down the road? Are we going to die tomorrow because of this?
Well, that's
which sounds like a crazy thing to say, but let's face it. A lot of people have thought about that. You know.
Well, isn't he sort of also just like I keep thinking he's like the evil character in a Batman movie.
Yeah.
And like we've never had to live that way. Yes, there are countries all around the world who have to live in conditions that are unacceptable, that we think we're higher than everybody because we live in a safe country where we can think these lofty thoughts. If you're in Russia, if you're in any, African dictatorship, certain places in Europe that are...
Yeah, the majority of the world lives that way, I think.
North Korea.
Yeah.
And you're, the dear leader stuff. And it's like, that to me, we can't lose that. And this is the kind of thing, the slow slide of giving in a little bit, giving in a little bit more, giving in a little more. And I don't think he necessarily wants to be a dictator. I think he doesn't know what he wants. I don't think he has I don't think he has an organizing principle. My
great fear prior to Election Day and then in the days immediately following that is exactly that. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to be living under a dictator. And I think you're right about that. I'm not necessarily sure he wants to do that. What I do know that he wants to do, and I think everybody knows this, is he wants everybody to absolutely kiss his ass.
Praise him, love him.
Yes. And
I think even above his business interests doing well.
Yeah.
I think he literally, and this is where I was living, and sounds like you are too, and people can say, well, we're liberal snowflakes, we're this, we're that. I am not. I am a straight ahead person. I read The Economist. I can't read a lot of right wing stuff because they're pushing you a certain way that I don't think they're being honest with.
Well, I will tell you this. I'm sorry if I interrupted.
No, it's okay.
But I'm not nearly as liberal as people think I am.
Sure.
So there's certain people that I'm sure think, oh, you're, this totally left wing snowflake type of person. I'm not nearly that way. In fact, I probably consider myself more towards the center of things. And on certain topics, I probably fall on the right side of things. And
we all fall on the right side in money.
Here's the thing. I didn't even know what left and right meant.
Right.
2 years ago. I had no idea what that meant. Right. And I still am not completely sure of why we need to.
But I don't think that's you. Terms. I think it's very amorphous.
Right? And there's topics that, we don't necessarily have to get into them here. But there are certain things that I sort of agree with certain people who are on the right side. Like, all right, maybe we have gone too far in this direction on this particular topic, right? But I just think that I probably got away from my original thought there. But yeah, I'm not as here's what I was going to say regarding the right wing media and all that stuff. I find it fascinating, to be honest with you, that certain people could read certain things and actually fall for it or see certain things on the news. Like, I think there actually probably is a chemical in your brain that makes you susceptible to certain messages. That to me is a dictatorship. I can, and I know this for a fact because I've done it, right? I get home every night about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And I usually don't go to bed right away. Sure. And even though I don't like the content that's on Fox News, it doesn't click with me. I do watch Fox News. I do watch it because as the kids say these days, is a certain term they use, I would like to stay woke, right? So if you don't know what that means, it means you just basically are aware
Eyes open.
of what's going on in the world. And I'm pretty convinced that I could sit in front of the television and watch Fox News for 6 straight months every day for hours and hours, and I would not turn on my beliefs. I would not start to feel the way they feel.
They do a very good job, though.
I would not start to believe what they believe in. I could read Breitbart News every single day, and I wouldn't believe what their message is.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't.
It's literally, it's entrepreneurial propaganda.
Yeah.
It's not state sanctioned propaganda, but there's propaganda. And the more you read open sources, and this is the danger, is that those outlets are telling people, no, look, reading the New York Times is the same as reading us.
Yeah.
Or reading The Economist. They're all pushing something. Yeah, they are. They're pushing something that is closer to, no one has the truth. They're pushing something closer to the truth.
I'll give you an example of something. Like, this just happened last night. It was about 2 a.m. All right. So we had these riots last night. I think maybe I shouldn't even call it that, but maybe in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah, I saw something about that. Yeah.
The cop was.
There's too much stuff happening on Fridays too. By the way, that's what Trump has destroyed. Fridays used to be like where you bury stuff.
Yeah.
Now it's like everything happens on a Friday because his kids go to the Sabbath or whatever, right?
So there was these situation in St. Louis where this cop was let off. He had shot a young black person, and he wasn't going to be charged, right? So they had this gathering in St. Louis. I don't know if they rioted or not, but all I know is this. I turn on Fox News, and there's a reporter in the street, and he says something like this. I saw one guy with a sawed-off shotgun. I saw another guy with a long rifle. And then I saw another guy who had what looked to be a pistol tucked into his pocket. I can't say if it was real or not, blah, blah, blah. Now, honestly, if you're a reporter out there in the street, is that something that sounds responsible to you? Like, I'm just going to say that I saw. Do we know for a fact that this guy actually saw 3 people walking around with guns? He just claimed that he saw 3 people that were walking around. One guy had a sawed-off shotgun. The other guy had a long rifle. And another guy had what appeared to be a pistol in his pocket. Right? And this is a Fox News reporter just walking around the street. And the first thing I thought of was, now all of a sudden, I know for a fact that I know people. I actually have people that I know who saw that, and the next time I see them are going to say there were all these black people were running around the streets in St. Louis carrying guns with sawed-off shotguns.
And they picked the imagery that is the worst kinds of those you can imagine.
So they didn't show us this. There was no video of it, no video evidence of it. There was no official statement from the police saying there are people with guns.
There weren't even 3 reporters who saw it.
There was one reporter from Fox News claiming that he saw people running around with guns. And now there are today millions of people in the U.S. eating bagels and drinking coffee saying, yeah, all these black people were running around St. Louis last night with guns.
And they're not going to go check.
Right? And that's where we are. And I'm not saying maybe it did happen. But in our business, you don't just see or hear something one time from one reporter and then go report it. You have to get verification of it.
Yeah,
right?
2 or 3, right?
You either get 2 or 3 witnesses who saw the same thing you did, or you get one official statement from the police chief, or you get the mayor saying something or whatever, or even better, show us a video, right? The camera guy who was shooting the reporter saying this must have been right next to him.
That's a good point.
Right? So the point is, I think, and a lot of people think, it's irresponsible. And what you said, it's also propaganda. And at that very moment, knowing what I know about Fox News and all that, I immediately said to myself, there's a chance that this guy didn't even see what he saw. And I know it was a show, that stupid show, The Five.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Which is, again, I watch this stuff because I'm in the business, sort of in the business, right? And I also like to be entertained by that. Like, I'm like, these people are like kind of crazy. So it's a little bit of entertainment value there. But also, I'm just fascinated by some of the things that come out of their mouths.
And how just inappropriate and unacceptable it is that somebody knows they did or did not see that. Mm-hmm. Did not get the verification, if they did, did not show you it. Show it. Like, it's obvious. We show war. We show literal war on the nightly news, and we're not seeing that. And that, to me, because there's so many eyeballs watching it, it's like, it's almost a grave act.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. Like, I will say this, like, and I'm not trying to make myself out to be, I mean, I'm in sports, right? I cover sports. I write about sports.
Stick to sports.
I edit sports and all that stuff. But I've been around for 20 years, and I've been in the newsroom, and I've been watching news and all that stuff. And I have friends who do other things, and I'm tight with people at universities that teach stuff and all that. See, from my standpoint, when I see that, I immediately know what's going on. When I turn on a certain channel, when I turn on Fox and I hear somebody say something, I can immediately say to myself, okay, that is irresponsible, or that is propaganda. There are plenty of people out there who don't have that advantage, who just tune in, hear something that one person says,
and it looks like the legitimate news.
I'll give you an example of something. This might very well be true, but I have no idea. And if they hear this, they're going to know who they are, and they're going to be pissed off at me for saying this, and I'm going to hear about it at my birthday party. I'll tell you that right now, right? Somebody told, my father was born in Cuba. I went to Cuba last year. Somebody said to me last week, can you believe that effing Cuban government didn't tell the people of Cuba that the hurricane was coming? Now, I immediately said to myself, wait a minute, that something doesn't sound right. Because I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter, and I follow people who live in Cuba, right? Just for photo reasons and stuff like that. And they're Instagramming about the hurricane coming. Let's be prepared, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So Cuban people knew that the hurricane was coming. And I'm like, where did this person get this information that the Cuban government hid the fact that the hurricane was coming? Right? And I don't know this for sure, but I'm like 95% certain that this person probably saw, like, Jesse Waters from Fox might have said that. Tucker Carlson from Fox might have said that. Sean Hannity might have said that. That the Cuban government hid the fact that the hurricane was coming. No, you know what probably happened? There are people in Cuba who live in remote areas, who don't have access to the internet, who don't have cell phones. And somebody must have said, well, these poor people don't really have an idea that this is coming. And then one of these other people jumped to the conclusion that the Cuban government hid the fact that the hurricane was coming.
But like, how is Fox News, like, how is that even getting to people? That's what makes me more worried is how is that message getting, which the flip side of that is it's made up.
Yeah. Some of it is made up.
That's the worrisome.
What bothers me, and this is the dangerous part of it, what bothers me is there are actually people out there that hear that and they believe it. And then they take it to somebody else and they tell them. Right. And then they take it to somebody else and they tell them.
And then when the president's telling you something, he's hitting home what you had.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this now. Yeah. So, yesterday I read on Twitter or something, wherever I saw it, Twitter, Instagram, that he declared yesterday was like, whatever it was called, like
Palmilla Day or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a day that we're going to honor the missing in action and the soldiers who were captured. Mm-hmm. Right? Great. That sounds great. That is honorable. There's nothing wrong with that, except for this. A year ago, right? Yeah. Donald Trump came out and said, I like people who weren't captured. Yeah. So do you see why certain people have reasons that they don't trust this guy, that they don't believe a damn word that comes out of his mouth? How do you say about John McCain?
I know.
I prefer people who weren't captured. You say that about John McCain. We're not playing manhunt in the street. John McCain was captured in Vietnam, right? John McCain is one of the biggest war heroes this country has ever known. He's one of the most respected people in this country. Right. Politicians, former, soldier, whatever it may be. He's one of the most respected men in this country. And he said that about John McCain. And then a year later, you're telling me that I'm supposed to give a crap that Donald Trump declared yesterday Palmilla Day? Now, I care about that.
Sure. But now the person can come back at you and take your
and say
that amplification to that message.
I care about those people.
Exactly.
And that's why I care that Donald Trump said that. But how are we supposed to trust anything that comes out of his mouth when a year ago he said that and now he's honoring them?
Right.
How does it work?
Well, and then the other part I think is insane is that when you try to call these things to account, then you just have the people in the Twitter stream, which maybe we just have to get off.
I gave up.
You have the people coming under the train just going, or the thread, just saying, well, get used to it because more is coming. And it's like, is that really, we're now into like prison justice where it's like, well, you don't like it, you're going to get more of it. And it's like, they don't even know what they're saying.
One of the hardest things for me, you mentioned it, Twitter. I had a difficult time in the beginning letting go of those Twitter people. Yeah. You know, I would get in these fights on Twitter. I had I was on Twitter for like an hour and a half tweeting back and forth with this one person.
And it was probably a Russian bot, by the way.
It might have been. But I was like getting all pumped up. I was pissed. I was on the verge of, having a breakdown or whatever. And then I sort of learned over time, like, all right, I can't do this. I'm not going to win this fight.
They're a persona. They're an angry persona, probably.
I've learned this in real life, too, dealing with real people and stuff. Well, I had this situation, and they might hear this, and I don't care. It's fine. Everything's good. I didn't speak to certain members of my family, but the word Donald Trump didn't come up in front of certain members of my family for a solid year. Yeah. It was unspoken, literally unspoken. And then one day I overheard somebody say something that really pissed me off, and I went up to this person and I said, basically, F you, right? And we got into it.
Yeah.
For, and I'm not going to lie, I had a couple drinks or whatever, and that probably broke down the wall. But it was a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing. It was good that we had the discussion because we needed to get it out there, the air. Sure. We had to get it aired out or whatever. But what I've learned is neither side is going to convince the other side that they're wrong or right or whatever it may be. So I have to understand that I truly believe that I'm on the right side. Mm-hmm. When I say right side, I mean the correct side. Right. And I have 68 million people plus another probably billion people. Billion. There's probably a billion people in this world. If you think about it. How many people on planet Earth? Like,
like 7 or 8
I think
something?
it's something like that. 7 billion. So maybe there's 5 billion people in this world who look at Donald Trump and say, like, what the hell were they thinking?
Right.
Right? So that's sort of what I think about sometimes when I'm like, I've thought about it. Like, am I missing something? What am I missing here? And I'm not missing something. I'm not, And it's just so funny. Like, lately, the past couple of days, have you noticed how, like, things have sort of shifted? So here we are, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, maybe.
Imagine if we did this when we were going to originally do it, which was mid-August.
Yeah.
It was a totally different tenor, because I was actually going to say to you, I don't know if it's the last week or 2 weeks. I don't know if it's by us putting ourselves in this day after day, we actually end up being the ones who pay.
Yeah.
Right. So I've almost gotten to the point where I tell myself, and yes, I'm a liberal snowflake. I read the New Yorker each week. The reason I like it is because people spent 6 months on these articles.
Yeah.
And I know they have the part at the beginning with 5 articles that are more current, but I know I'm going to read stuff and I'm going to learn something that's going to help me in the long term. I then supplement it by reading some things that are happening in real time. But I don't know if it was what he did with that meeting and the debt ceiling deal, where he just goes, I'm with Chuck and Nancy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was that helped me. I'm not behind him. I'm not, for him or whatever. I mean, we're all for the country, right? But I don't know if it was that made me just go like, okay, maybe if the right and left vie for his attention enough, it slows down the Trump train enough to where we just have to see through a few years, rearm the voting rolls, make sure people are aware of what's going on, get some good candidates. But I just think, I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was a fever breaking. I don't know if it was, I'm walking around in a goddamn haze since this election. And the more you read, the more it just puts you in a bad place. And you just, I don't know, I just haven't felt right since November 8th.
I know what you're saying. And for me, it was intense in the beginning. It was intense in the beginning.
It was almost like I remember staying up till like 4 or 5 a.m. on the night of the election because I was in such shock and I was afraid to wake up the next morning.
It's funny that you say that. It really is funny. So certain times in life, things happen and you think you're the only one experiencing it. Election night, maybe I shouldn't say this. People are going to think snowflake.
Yeah.
I actually cried myself to sleep that night. I'm being honest with you. I had tears coming out of my eyes on that night because is this possible? How is this possible that this, let's face it, joke of a person, joke of a candidate, we all thought it was a joke in the beginning. This guy won the election, and now we're
with
learning,
all the things he said, and it didn't matter.
Now we're learning that there was he had some help.
Sure.
Right. So anyway, I went to bed that night probably like 3:30. Right. I had to be up at 6 because I was getting ready to teach a class at Monmouth. Right. So I had to be up at 6. I slept like 2 hours that night. Yeah. Drove down to Monmouth. We got ready to walk into the classroom with a bunch of, 19, 20-year-old and, women in the class and all that. I didn't know what the hell to say. I had made it very clear to the class that I wasn't a Donald Trump fan.
It was like something had passed away.
So now, it was this part of like this not innocence. That's a bad word to use there, but
this understanding.
Yeah, this certain way that we live, this standard that we held for this country. No matter what, you could disagree with a candidate. You could agree with the candidate. You could hate George Bush. You could hate Obama. The bottom line is they were like real candidates who knew what they were talking about, who cared enough about what they were talking about, who were educated, who didn't need to go the route of like, let's kick all these disgusting Mexicans out of the country. Let's get rid of all these, horrible.
Going after individuals. The president going after individuals. The president blocking people on Twitter. Going after news personalities.
Just behavior that we had come to expect from like crazy celebrities.
Toddlers, too.
Yeah. Basically like we have an immature 12-year-old as president. So you've seen a little bit of it change. One of the things that happened is, I think, for him, and I hate to say this way, but the hurricanes hit. Yeah. And it sort of allowed him an opportunity to go out and try to show that he was capable of being a normal president, which I don't think he really did. Yeah. But people perceived it that way. Yeah. And here's an example of it. I don't know if a lot of people may not have seen this. I saw it on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, which I see. It's where I see a lot of stuff. Yeah. Right? Because you get a lot of raw footage and all that there. He was talking to somebody in Florida, I think it was, and he called the guy over and said, say it again. And the guy said, where was Obama during the last hurricane? He's probably playing golf. And then Trump said to him, tell him about the vote. And he pointed to himself. He goes, best vote of my life. And then Trump yells out to the reporters, it was the best vote of his life. You won't report that because it's good news. Is that really what the president of the United States should be doing, can be doing in a moment where he's down in Florida trying to help these people recover from a natural disaster? Have we ever had a president go as low as ripping his predecessor?
Via
totally
a hurricane victim.
Trashing. He does nothing but trash Obama.
And undo Obama's policies. That's it.
All he does. You could disagree with Obama. You could disagree with George Bush. You could disagree with Bill Clinton. Nobody has ever come along and said, this guy's a piece of trash. He didn't know, he wasn't born in the country. Come on.
He's preoccupied with him.
Yeah. He's preoccupied with him for probably a couple of reasons. One, he's black, Obama, obviously. And two, he knows down deep that he is not a pimple on Obama's butt.
No.
He's not the president that Obama was. He really has no original ideas, if you think about it. Any of his ideas all have to do with undoing other people's ideas, right?
Or what he heard that morning.
All undoing other people's ideas. And his big ideas, let's face it, his two huge ideas, and they're not even his original ideas, but his two big campaign promises have colossally failed. I'm going to immediately repeal and replace Obamacare. Immediately first. It's going to be easy. Yeah. He said that. That's a quote. Look it up. It's going to be easy. And he failed epically in that way. Now, after it's done, I'm just going to blame Mitch McConnell and whoever else. And now he's going back on his wall promise. Like, So do these people start to see like why other people didn't trust Donald Trump?
Well, it's fascinating that it's to watch Breitbart is fascinating since Bannon is back there. And also talk about a guy who has a self-aggrandizement or whatever the word is about himself. Steve Bannon's ego is about as big as Donald Trump's. This guy, we never heard of him before.
I don't know where he came from. I was just saying that the other day at work. Like, where did this guy come from? I mean, I know. Here's my guess, and this is probably because I heard it somewhere. I'm not breaking any ground here. My guess is that he was at Breitbart, kissed Donald Trump's butt.
Well, it was more the Mercers. So the Mercers are these like billionaire investors who believe in hard right policies. They gave a big, as I understand it, there was a very good New Yorker, article on Bannon a while ago. Very fair, straightforward about where he's come from. But the Mercers put a very sizable investment, I believe, into Breitbart. And it was the Mercers who end up being big donors who helped get Bannon in as CEO with Trump. And I think what happened was he only got there like in August. So the final run to the presidency, Donald Trump wins. I guess they cleaned up some things that maybe helped his message. I do give Trump credit in the fact that he campaigned about as hard as I've ever seen someone campaign, like flying out the night before, going to weird places. We wondered why. It might be turn out there was some intel he had from other places that helped him know to do that. But I think he won. Bannon was with him. He loves winning. A equals B equals C. Steve Bannon is winning.
Yeah.
And then he allowed, which you got to give the people who get you in there, he allowed about 7 or 8 months to give their shot. Everything they did was ham-handed, failed. He's not a true Republican, Trump that is. So there was I think he was almost disgusted when he saw what Republican ideas about healthcare are. And I think 7, 8 months in, he's like, I can't take this. Losing is out of control. I'm going to play to my base, which puts you deeper in. And then I think this bizarre lifeline where he didn't know it was the right or wrong decision. And he just said, I'm going with them because they made a good call. And then seeing the news the next day, Morning Joe's even talking about me.
Yeah.
Tells Chuck Schumer, Fox is saying good things about you. That's it. And I think he sees a winning hand now. He just wants to win. He just wants to get praised.
He doesn't have a game plan at all. You know, he doesn't have a game plan. The game plan was just...
It's good for campaigning.
Let me talk a bunch of crap, and then I know X amount of people are going to get behind me. There's a lot of hatred, let's face it. I personally know this as a fact. Again, these certain people might hear this and draw conclusions, but I know people who are not the most open-minded people in the world. Let's just say that. And that is the appeal. I don't want these people this is them talking now.
Yeah.
I don't want this person anywhere near me, this type of person. I don't want this Mexican person anywhere near me. I don't want this, person from the Middle East. I don't want them near me at all. Donald Trump has made a promise to me that he's going to get rid of them all. Yeah. So I like Donald Trump just for that. I don't care what he thinks about other stuff. I don't care what he says about, healthcare. I don't care what he says about.
And no one ever said this to me.
Yes, nobody's ever brought that out. Nobody's opened up. I heard somebody say this last night, is that what he did was he made it okay for people to show their ignorance in public, their bias in public.
But he's the ultimate con man because he'll pull the rug out.
Yeah. And nobody in history, not in history, I shouldn't say that, but nobody in recent history, especially in the U.S., when were you ever able to walk into a room and say, I hate this particular style of person. I don't like this person from this particular country. They're bad. They're dirty. They're sleazy. They want to kill us. They're scumbags, rapists, and all that stuff. It became normal to be able to walk into a room and say that again. Right? And for most of us, we don't really do that. And now all of a sudden we're a snowflake. I wanted to get to a point about the snowflake thing before. Sure. What sounds like more of a snowflake to you? Somebody who is willing to keep an open mind and live amongst people who are different than them, right? I drive to work every day. I go through Union City all the time because I like to stop and get food, which I shouldn't do as much anymore. But there's all sorts of people there in Union City. There's Cuban people, which my father's from Cuba. My grandmother still lives there. There's all sorts of Hispanic people. You'll see Muslim people, everybody, you know. So I live in a part of the state and the country and all that is very diverse, right? So I could give a crap about walking down the street and seeing blacks, Hispanics, Muslims, all that stuff. So what sounds like more of a snowflake to you? Somebody who is willing to live amongst these people together and get it done together, or somebody who's afraid that those people live in my neighborhood now? Why are these people moving into my neighborhood? I'm afraid. I'm going to put more locks on my door. I'm going to try to get rid of these people. I'm going to try to stop these people from coming into my life because I'm afraid of them.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like a bit of a snowflake. You're afraid of living amongst certain people. Maybe you're the one with the problem. Maybe you're the one that needs to grow a pair of, you know what, you know. So that those are the people that they're more afraid than we are, and yet we're being called snowflakes,
right?
Because we're crying that Donald Trump,
it's not even
became president.
Yeah, it's almost like no person who's coming at us. It's more about you than it is even about him.
Yeah,
it's the mirror you see in him that is the dangerous point.
Yeah,
and it's just it's out of control. I mean, my biggest thing is because you also, as a sane, coherent person, you want to also always be. You don't want to get too biased because of your dislike for a certain person. That's the difficulty here too. I keep coming to grips with, what if this bizarre thing happens where this winning streak keeps happening with Chuck and Nancy? And I think the Republicans are going to destroy themselves because they're going to start voting down these things that Trump agrees to with Chuck and Nancy, or let them go through. And either way, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they let them go through, they could get voted out. If they knock it down, they could be voted out. But I keep coming back to, where do I end up in my mental space if he keeps this winning streak with people who, do I 100% love them? Probably not. But are they more on the side of center, or whatever you'd call it, or close to center, as the types of things I believe in? Are they more the type of people I am, a coastal elite, I guess, if you call us that? Where do we end up if 6 months from now the winning streak has Donald Trump on the side of things that we end up believing with? If DACA happens.
Here's the thing. This is, and I think I understand what you're saying, and I will say this. To me not liking Donald Trump, me disliking Donald Trump, doesn't have so much to do about the policies. It's not all about the policies. It is just merely about not just merely about. Let me say that over. It's not all about the policies, and it's not only about this, but it's more about what I'm about to say. It's the way he behaves. It's the way he carries himself. It's the things that he says. So if Donald Trump says, I am going to allow the Dreamers to stay in the country, that's cool. I get it. I get why people don't want them here. Like, I understand certain things, and I don't disagree with everything. Do I think that we need tighter border security? We absolutely do. We do need better security. Do I think that it would be good that we didn't have as many illegal immigrants flowing into the country? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. We need to tighten things up.
One of the fascinating things is, though, I don't think you or I actually know if we need better. That's the difficult. We need the best.
It's up for debate.
We need it really good, but they can play that angle because it's an intangible.
Certain things are up for debate.
Yeah.
My problem is with the behavior and what he stands for, the things that he says, the way he acts, and just the way that he is disrespecting the office of the presidency. The things that he says, the way he behaves, the things that have become normal.
Right.
They're not normal. It is not normal for the president of the United States to say, go knock the crap out of him. Go beat up that reporter. It's fake news. The fake news thing, that ship has sailed a long time ago. Yet we still have people that chirp it. We still have people that will repeat that phrase and believe it Do they believe it? I hope they don't, but I think they do.
Well, they need to
But that ship has sailed. Yeah. That Russia is not fake news. No. It's not fake news.
Well, they are.
We know that.
I mean, they actually are.
They created fake news. But anyway, back to my original point. My biggest problem is not necessarily the policies. He wants to change Obamacare. Let him do it. If he's got a better idea, let him do it. That's fine with me.
He won.
Okay?
Let them pass it if they want to pass it.
If they can do it. If they know what they're doing, let them do it. My biggest problem is with him, the way he acts. Mm-hmm. He is not a president. He's not a president. He might be the president right now, but he is not a president.
Or presidential.
The way he behaves is an embarrassment to the country. And this is one of the things I always go back to. And this is fascinating to me and sad. He used to say all the time that the United States had become the laughingstock of the world, and it was not.
Yeah.
But guess what? Now,
yeah,
we sort of are.
Yeah.
We've gotten so much closer to becoming the laughingstock of the world under his watch. So when Obama was president, when Bill Clinton was president, when George Bush was president, we didn't agree with a lot of those things. Nobody wanted to, most people didn't want to go to war and all that stuff. But the person, you thought, you understood that the person was trying to make the best decision for the country, was at least trying to behave in a certain way, was being respectful of certain traditions that we have that matter, right? And now, under this president, we are so much closer to becoming exactly what he told us we already were, a laughingstock.
It's like the MAGA thing we talked about.
People are laughing at this president all over the world. And it's because of him that we have become closer to being a laughingstock when he was telling us that we already were. That to me is like a fascinating thing.
It really is. And And the other thing, like we were just saying, was the fact that that he, where was I going with it? Okay, I know where I was going with this. So he's saying things publicly, and it's mostly Twitter. It's mostly where the stuff comes. He's saying things publicly that when we have secret tapes of a lot of these presidents, they have said privately. And that to me is another, when you hear the Nixon tapes, the things he said about ethnicities, about the true nature of certain individuals. You hear some things like even from Lyndon Johnson, who probably never would have been president, but got there because JFK was assassinated and enacted some of the most liberal policies we've ever seen that have lived on 50 years later. But you hear the things they say when they knew it was private. That's something that's really fascinating to me. And again, I'm not saying that I'm for him in any way. You try to grapple each day with these things. And in some ways, he's not doing things that presidents ever did before because he's not presidential. But maybe his biggest problem is he's saying things publicly in this platform that they were saying privately before.
Well, I think now you're touching upon something that's one of the reasons people do like him and back him is because he says things that other people aren't willing to say. But there are certain things that people aren't willing to say for a reason.
Yeah.
Because they're inappropriate to say, because they make no sense, or because they're just cruel,
repugnant,
mean, ignorant, and all that. And here's one of the biggest problems I have with him is that, and his effect on people, is that, and I'm not the most educated guy in the world. I don't have a master's degree or anything like that. I don't run around reading these, all these high level, books and things like that. I'm just an educated guy, and I try to keep my mind open, and I read certain things, and I try to stay on top of things, right? But what he has done, in my opinion, is made it okay to be uneducated and uninformed. People who are uninformed and uneducated love this guy because he reminds them of themselves.
Yeah.
It's okay to be ignorant because the president
Thank God ignorant. I don't have to know more.
Yeah. I don't know much about this topic, and that's fine because the president doesn't know about this topic either. I run around calling people horrible names, and that's okay.
I've always said this in my truck on my own.
The president says that too. So it's cool. You know, there's this phrase I heard one day. What the hell is it? I can't think of it now. Anti-intellectualism. Anti-intellectualism. Okay. And that is the idea that, there are certain people out there who don't like intellectual people. They are intimidated by them, which is probably the root of the whole thing. But they don't like the fact that certain people are educated, and more so than that, they think it's okay to be an anti-intellectual. Like I don't read, I'm dumb. And I'm saying that in that way because that's literally what it is.
Again, another keep these people away from me.
And somebody said it this way. My ignorance, and I saw this somewhere. It might have been like Bill Maher or something like that. My ignorance is just as valuable as your intellect, your education, right? My ignorance is just as important, just as meaningful. We should respect my ignorance as much as people respect your education, your level of intellect. That has become sort of normalized, right? Well, I don't know. I don't give a crap about this topic. I don't give a crap about that. What do I care about this for? People probably heard Obama speak, and this, come on, let's face it. This is absolutely true. People heard this first black president speak, and they didn't like the fact that they didn't understand what the hell he was talking about because he was speaking at a level that they just couldn't grasp. You mean to tell me that there aren't people out there that didn't like the fact that they couldn't wrap their minds around what the first black president was talking about? They weren't smart enough to understand what he was saying? Come on. That is a huge part of it. That is a huge part of it. This black guy, let's be, again, brutally honest. This black guy is so much smarter than I am. And that's probably Trump right there in a nutshell. There was a black man in this office before I was here, and he knows so much more about the world than I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock him down. I'm going to try to knock him down a couple of pegs so that people think I'm smarter than he is.
Well, it's like in sports. Let's go after the quarterback's knees. Yeah. That's the only way we can level this playing field.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing. I mean, that might sound cruel, and it might sound like the people who follow Trump might be insulted by that, but it's a fact. I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, it's an absolute fact. Like I, for a fact, know people who are intimidated by education. They're intimidated by somebody walking into a room who's sort of like an intellectual person, who is well-read, who's well-dressed. They are intimidated by that, right? And that's part of the reason Donald Trump holds a certain appeal. It's because, let's face it, he is not one of those people, but he's played these games. He's
the stature of one of those people, but he comes in and talks at your level. That's what they love. And to be fair, they are correct in the fact that, and maybe no one should have been talking to them. Maybe the point of government should be to raise them up to reach our level as opposed to talk down to that level. But he literally was the only person in decades who walked into these areas and actually talked to them in the language they're used to being talked to.
You give them credit for that. The thing that I don't understand is the people who are educated, right, and who are intellectual people and who know better.
That scares me about biases, because that could be female bias. Yeah, that could be race bias. They
still went in that direction, and I know a lot of people like that. Like there's certain people that I look at and I could say to myself, all right, I totally know why they voted for Donald Trump, and I saw it coming. I knew that they were going to vote for Donald Trump, and I know why they voted for Donald Trump.
There's a lot of people like that who didn't say it because they were ashamed to say it.
After the fact, I learned that certain people voted for Donald Trump and still support him, and I'm like, holy crap, I had no idea that this person was like that. And where did that come from? I have no idea. But for the most part, I think you could probably put your finger on. Like, if you thought about certain people that you know who maybe you haven't seen in a while, you could probably say, all right, I know for sure that person voted for Donald Trump, and I know that person for sure didn't vote for Donald Trump. And one of the great things that happens to me on a regular basis is I'll find out like so-and-so is not a Donald Trump supporter, and I'll say, oh, thank God. Like, I'll be like, oh my God. I'll like breathe a sigh of relief. Like, all right, it's cool. I don't have to worry about that person, you know?
So the
people are going to hear this and be pissed off.
That's fine. That's what this is
like,
for.
There's certain people that are going to hear this that I know for a fact. Like, I know that if certain people in my life hear this, they are going to be very angry, right? Yeah. But here's what I will say about that. Stick around, pay attention for the next 6 months or a year or whatever it will be, and you will start to understand why people don't like this guy, if you haven't already. Because I'm pretty sure that certain people in the back of their mind, they're never going to admit it yet, are like,
well, it's hard to admit it.
I know that this guy isn't a real
It's very
president.
hard. It's very hard to admit it. The final thing, which will bring this all full circle, Brian Curtis of The Ringer, who's a good media coverage writer, he had brought this up, whether it was in the campaign or maybe, I think it was in the campaign, that Donald Trump is the first sports radio president. Yeah. And in many ways, it's very similar. You see this, and you have to on radio. You have to speak first before thinking a lot of times. But it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And I could think about Mike Francesa, for instance. It's this, I know everything. And that's part of the allure. That's why we listen. I know everything. And he does know a lot. But that which he doesn't know, he still acts as if he knows everything. It's combative. Like, who's calling into radio shows? And think about the combativeness. Think about the get him off my air, you know?
Yeah.
It's the sports radio presidency.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's dangerous, though, because that's not the way the presidency works, you know, without knowing everything about, obviously. You can't say things before you know what you're talking about.
No, it's dangerous.
You can do that in radio, and it works.
You can move nuclear missiles around the country.
Even in sports writing, I've written stories before where you sort of have to just BS your way through a story a little bit and make it sound as if you know what you're talking about.
Sure.
But you can't do that when you're the president or leader of anything, a country or whatever. That's going to get you in trouble. And I think part of it is, I agree with what he said, and I said this a while back, and a lot of people have said this a while back. I think this is not something that just happened. It's not something that just happened overnight. I think you have to go back, and I will go back to this moment. I remember this. I hate to bring it up again, but after 9/11, immediately after 9/11, I recall people saying, this is going to change everything.
Right.
We are no longer going to be a society that cares about reality TV. We're not going to care about celebrity
We're all one
statuses and all that kind of stuff. And that lasted about 6 weeks. And then people went back to that. I think in this country, there is a reality television mindset where people are so drawn to that. This person, I mean, can we rule out the possibility right now that like Kim Kardashian would throw her name into the ring, or like,
well, you're hearing The Rock,
or somebody like that,
who's, by the way, a Republican apparently.
Yes,
which is interesting.
So, or Kid Rock.
Oh yeah, The Rock or Kid Rock. Yeah.
Can we rule out the possibility that one of those people will run for office
and win
and make a significant run at the title, so to speak?
Well, the key is winning, because remember, Howard Stern ran for governor in the 90s.
But sometimes it's a joke, it's a gag or whatever. But I think part of the problem with the country is, and this is where the media, certain media people have to take certain responsibility, is that a lot of people are so drawn in by these reality TV people. Sure. And that's exactly what Donald Trump was. The Apprentice. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for other people. I watch The Apprentice every night. I saw Donald Trump. I like what he had to say. I like his personality. And now, look what he's saying about, all these topics that I feel strongly about and all that stuff. So the reality TV mindset that we have in this country right now is part of the reason why we're in the position we're in, right? People care. For some reason, they care about what these people are doing in their everyday life. I say this all the time to my wife. Like, my wife loves to watch like those Dance Moms and like all these other shows. I don't even know what they're called.
Real Housewives.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I happen to live in the same town that one of those shows is based in. So I'll be careful because I see some of these people. And my daughter goes to school
if
with
they're an hour and 45 minutes into a podcast, we want them as a listener.
That's good.
That's okay.
So, why do I care about watching people sit at their kitchen table talking about a fight that they had at a family party? Like, that's what these reality TV shows are.
You've used up bandwidth in your head on that.
Why do I care about that?
And why do you come back next week to find out what happened at the next time?
Because I'm going to be doing that myself.
Right.
In a half an hour, I'm going to a party. So as an example, I'm going to a family party in a half an hour, and I'm going to be fighting with my own family about something. Why do I want to sit around and watch somebody else do that who I don't really give a crap about? So anyway, the point is there is absolutely a reality TV obsession, and I think that obviously has a huge part in this. Like, that is absolutely part of the reason why this guy won. And I'm scared. I will say this. My fear of Donald Trump has sort of dissipated a little bit. The
structures have held to a degree.
Yes, a little bit. What I am more frightened about right now, I think, is that this can of worms has been opened. And now we've already seen it. I mean, are we seriously considering giving a serious attention to Kid Rock if he wants to run for political office?
And he's got the picture. Remember?
Right?
Him and Palin in the White House.
So are we going to take him seriously because he's Kid Rock and he says he wants to run for office? Are we going to take even people that might be on the left side, who I don't know where The Rock falls?
I think he's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what he said. He's a Republican.
Maybe some people might, let's just say, for example, Kanye West, who I would assume would be on the left.
Yeah.
He would be a Democrat. He would be on, so to speak, my side. Why in the world would I ever take him seriously? He's got no... Where does he come into play when it comes to somebody who you would take seriously running for political office? So that's what scares me, is the fact that there are people out there, we know now, that will take it seriously, that will give these people votes, but and to be accountable here, I'm in the media business. There are media outlets that will give them serious attention
because they got to. It's newsjacking. It's ratings. Right?
It's a problem.
Subscribers.
It's something dangerous about it. You know, if they didn't in the beginning, in the early days, give Donald Trump the attention that he got, we might not be here right now. But on the flip side, you know, when 25,000 people show up at a rally for this guy, all right, maybe you have to take it seriously.
You have to cover it. He gets to the end.
But that's my fear. Like, is, you know, Justin Bieber going to all of a sudden say one day I'm running for president, and people are going to take it seriously, and that all of a sudden we're sitting here with Justin Bieber as president?
Or did only Donald Trump get away with the horse getting out of the barn? Did he get away with this not paying attention aspect? Whereas the next person, people will go, okay, fooled me once.
Yeah.
Now I'm locked in. But it's either the can of worms opening, and now we're all open to it, or it's we're refortified for the next time. The thing you brought up, and I would make a final point because it sounds like you have to go to a party, even though you see how you could do this forever.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
fun. But you brought up a great point about the reality television, and I would take it one step further. And I would say, as opposed to the unifying platform of all of us being America, I'm starting to wonder if the unifying platform of all of us is actually television. And somebody who's watching television doesn't see the difference between President Obama coming on NBC to give a presidential address, being followed by The Apprentice, being hosted by Donald Trump, reality television being on Bravo, being the same as ESPN talking about sports, being the same as MSNBC or Fox talking about politics. It's all one leveling platform, and maybe people don't see a difference between if you make it to TV, you've made it to being on that TV that we can all see, these 100 million households, which is a huge number, who are piped into that cable. Maybe that is the thing. If you cross that threshold where you're on my television and I could find my way to it, you are somebody.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely a fact. And I think there's a certain like laziness involved in that. Like, and by that, I mean, it's like
there's a passive aspect as opposed to an active on demand. I have to choose what I'm going to watch. I have to choose what I'm going to listen to. I'm enlightened maybe by doing that, but I'm going to sit. I'm choosing. This is the time. TV is, it's on. Something find me.
Yeah. And I think that there's people just want to kind of sit there and be entertained and like not have to. There's a lot of people, and this is going to sound really like that elite type thing that people.
You or I want that too at times.
Well, yes, but I think not everybody is as willing as certain other people to like. Let me get up on Sunday morning and go out and buy the New York Times and find out what's going on and what's important to me and what's going to affect my life. I just kind of want to sit around today and like watch reality TV.
Watch a marathon.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know.
It's not a bad choice.
It's not just one thing. See, here's the thing. This is one of the things I've learned in life. Okay. With the exception of natural disasters, and now even that is questionable. But for the most part, when you have disasters, like, say, a plane crash, a train accident, a building collapse. This is one of the things I've learned. Rarely, if ever, is it one thing that causes it. It's usually a series of events. Somebody didn't do their job in the factory the right way. The next guy didn't notice it. The guy who was driving the train was texting. Didn't notice the red light that went off, and a person was driving a car. They were drunk, and then they both crashed together. Right? There's usually like 4 or 5 steps that go into a disaster, and I think the bottom line is with this Trump thing, it's the same thing. It wasn't any one thing. It wasn't like reality TV created this president. It was partially reality TV combined with people's biases and people's hatred of other people combined with
which, by the way, you're going to say it, I'm not going to give Russians the only factor.
Yes.
Right?
Combined with the Russian interference. So you put those 3 things together right there, and now all of a sudden you have a recipe for disaster, which for most of us it is, right? And then there's probably 4 or 5 other things in there. And let's be fair, the flip side is Hillary Clinton didn't run a great campaign, or Hillary Clinton used her stupid email server who, you know, really gives a crap about that, but people cared about it. And we take these like 10 factors, which if you took any one of them wouldn't be enough. But when you put them all together, it is enough to create this situation. So that's what I'm talking about. Like when your hot water heater explodes and your basement floods, it's not just one thing.
Right.
It was the fact that you knew that it was time to replace your hot water heater, but you ignored it because you wanted to buy new podcast equipment instead of a new hot water heater. And your son was crying that day that you were going to go out and get it. And your wife wanted to go shopping, so you didn't really have the money for it. There's like always 3 or 4 things that lead to a disaster. It's never one thing, right? And that's what, in my opinion, happened.
Absolutely. And I would close it by saying, and I heard somebody say this around the time that Donald Trump won when we were all trying to figure out what happened. You can't exploit something if a divide or a breach doesn't already exist there.
Yeah.
You can only exploit a divide.
Yes.
So, Julian, 2 hours. That was fantastic.
Oh, my God. Was it 2 hours?
It was a lot of fun.
I thought it was supposed to be an hour.
It was, but
I thought we were going to talk about Bruce Springsteen, too, but maybe.
We will. You'll do this again. This is good, right?
All right, cool.